So despite the overwhelming amount of support for a single-payer healthcare system in this country, Democrats have failed to ever bring Medicare for All to a floor vote. So one way that progressives could move that legislation forward, says Jimmy Dore, is to withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker and in exchange demand a vote on M4A. Author and host of The Jimmy Dore Show, Jimmy Dore himself is here to talk about exactly that. So great to see you, Jimmy.
So great to see you. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to get this message out. So here's the message, if I could just tell people. So progressives are always told that they don't know how to use power. They don't know how to grab power. Well, they don't have power, right? But the progressives who are elected in Congress right now, I mean the real progressives, not the 100 people in the Progressive Caucus. I'm talking about the Squad, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Ro Khanna, people like that, Ayanna Pressley, people who are actually have progressive policies. Now they have leverage. What's their leverage, Jimmy? Well, Nancy Pelosi needs their vote for Speaker, right? Because the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi performed so poorly that they lost seats in the House under Donald Trump. So now the margin is really small, right? So just a handful of progressives could say, Nancy Pelosi, we're withholding our vote from you for Speaker unless you bring up Medicare for All for vote on the floor. That's our deal. Now it's up to Nancy Pelosi. Do you want to risk your speakership, or do you want to make sure we have a vote on a basic human right? This is very doable. Everybody who I've said, even my detractors are saying this is a great idea. So this is a good idea. This could actually work. We all are upset that progressives never flex their muscle, never use their power. You know, the worst abuse of power, Crystal, is not using the power you have to fight for people. So right now, they have the power. They could do this. This is the only time in the next 2 years that the progressives are going to have any leverage whatsoever. And I'm begging them to use it right now to make Nancy Pelosi bring a vote for Medicare for All. It is time to get people on the record. Some people say, well, it wouldn't pass. Well, then the American people who are overwhelmingly for Medicare for All need to know exactly who's against it, because people who are running on Medicare for All get elected. We need to have a marker right now, and we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic. This is politics 101. You know who knows how to use their leverage? The Freedom Caucus knows how to use their leverage. Right-wingers. In fact, the last time Nancy Pelosi was up for the Speaker election, the conservative Democrats extracted concessions from her. She actually had to move to the right for them.
That's right.
So all I'm asking is for the progressives to do the exact same thing that any political body would do. They would make sure they got something for their support from Nancy Pelosi. And it's really easy. A vote for Medicare for All in the middle of a pandemic, I think it's an easy thing to do.
Well, and that's what we've seen in the polling is, first of all, you've had tens of millions of Americans lose their employer-sponsored health insurance. So the need has always been dire. It's never been more dire than right now. And that's reflected in the polling, which shows support for Medicare for All stronger than ever. I think what you're speaking to, though, there's a broader point here about basically, especially if you are a minority group and faction within Washington and within the House, you have to not only be willing to play hardball, you have to be willing to play harder ball than the people who actively, affirmatively hold power. And the one area where we've actually seen the Democratic establishment be willing to play hardball is when it comes to crushing the left. So what is your expectation about whether or not this group, which now the Squad has grown, you've got Cori Bush in there, maybe if we cross our fingers, eventually we might have Nina Turner in there. She's filed to run for Marcia Fudge's congressional seat. Do you think that you have a little bit more willingness to play hardball, a little bit more understanding that Democratic leadership's not your friend? They're as much your enemy as the Republican leadership is.
Well, what I've tried to explain to progressives is that the Democratic leadership, Nancy Pelosi, they hate progressives more than Republicans. So yes. I think that's the thing they don't realize. Like, I've tried to explain on my show, I make the point over and over that the first job of the Democratic Party is to crush the politician who's representing the workers. And then and only then can they move on to trying to go against Republicans. Their first order of business was to crush Bernie Sanders. And then they could go on to trying to defeat Donald Trump. That's the most important thing. So, yes, they don't realize that their obstacle right now is a conservative right right-winger who's a puppet of Wall Street and the military-industrial complex named Nancy Pelosi. And if they're not willing to stand up to Nancy Pelosi right now to get Medicare for all for people in the middle of a deadly pandemic, then what is the point of voting for them? There is no point. I'm saying they can prove me wrong and do this. This is easily done. This is, what else are you going to do? Because in 2 years, they're going to be wiped out in the House. You know that, right? So in 2 years, the Democrats lose their majority. They lose their speakership. And the only time that the progressives in Congress are going to have any power is right now at this moment to withhold their vote from Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi's speakership is not more important than a basic human right. So I heard people say, well, they might be committing career suicide if they do that. What is really, you know what's career suicide? Not fighting for Medicare for all in the middle of a deadly pandemic. Fighting for people's health care is how you get reelected. Not fighting for it is how Joe Crowley lost. That's how you get elected. The people, Nancy Pelosi doesn't hire and fire Congress people. It's the people in your district. And if they see you fighting against the power for them, for health care in the middle of a deadly pandemic, you're going to get reelected.
Yeah, and that was demonstrated incredibly clearly this cycle where everyone who backed Medicare for All got reelected and a bunch of corporate blue dogs ultimately lost their seats. Jimmy, what is the response when you were telling me that Congressman Mark Pocan, I guess former co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, was asked about this? What was his response?
He was asked about it on the Thom Hartmann show, and he pretended like it was a crazy idea and it couldn't work, and whoever thought of it didn't know how stuff works. And he actually went on to make my case. He said that we don't have a 10 or 15 seat majority anymore. It might be because of COVID. People might be sick. He said it might come down to one vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, which makes my point. So now it only takes one progressive to say, I'm going to withhold my vote from Nancy Pelosi unless you do this. So you even have more power. So he was trying to find a way to not do this. And he actually accidentally made the case to do this.
Yeah, and that is one thing that has occurred to me. I hadn't thought of this specific play, which I think is brilliant, and I hope that gets some traction in the House. But because the margin is so narrow now, because Democrats so dramatically underperformed in this election, it actually does give the squad plus the true progressives, as you put it, it does give them some more power, because Pelosi used to always just be able to dismiss them. Oh, you're just 4 votes. It doesn't matter. First of all, that 4 votes is now closer to 10. Second of all, you can't afford to really lose any of them at this point.
Right. That's exactly right. Because exactly as Mark Pocan pointed out, the majority, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats' majority might be even just a handful of votes. So they actually do have all the power. And now is when moments like this don't happen every day. You know that, Crystal. And by the way, for the next 2 years, they're going to have absolutely no power or leverage. This is the one time. And what I'm asking them to do is to stand up and be seen fighting for the most popular policy idea in the country. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking them to fight for a fringe thing that's going to work. I'm asking them to fight for the most popular policy idea in the country right now, which is Medicare for all. 9 out of 10 Democrats want it. 70% of Americans, the majority of Trump voters want it. The time is now, and if they're seen fighting for it, they will get reelected.
Jimmy, so great to see you. Thank you for making this case. Thank you for putting the idea out there, and we'll continue to push it as much as we can here.
Thank you, Crystal. Nancy Pelosi's speakership is not more important than health care.
That's it. That's it right there. All right, we're going to have more Rising for you after this.